Welcome back to Human Biology with Dr. B. Today we're talking about tissues, all the various types of tissues in the body. So there are four main types of tissues that make up just about everything that makes your body work. The first is epithelial. This covers body surfaces, lines all the body cavities, organs, and forms glands. The muscle, as we very well know, it allows our body to move, as well as move things within our body. And connective tissue basically connects everything. That's what it does. It connects everything to each other. There's adipose, blood and lymph. It provides support and protection for all the organs. And then neural tissue conducts nerve impulses throughout the body so that various parts of the body can communicate with one another. So epithelial tissue is classified based on the shape of the cell. There are three basic shapes. There's squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. And then it is further classified based on layers. Simple is one single layer of cells, and stratified means that it's very clearly different layers of cells. And then pseudostratified, you can see that there's more than one layer of cell, but it's not in clear delineations. So here we have a squamous cell shape. It basically looks like a cracked egg. Like if you were to crack a raw egg and put it on your skillet, there you see the bubble where the yolk is, and then the whites kind of splay out to the edges. That's exactly what a squamous cell looks like. When it is a simple squamous, it's one layer. This is a capillary right here. And then stratified, you can see the endothelium right here. Cross section, and this is longitudinal. And stratified epithelium occurs anywhere the body interacts with something else. For example, the skin interacts with the external area, the oral cavity with your food, the pharynx where you swallow, esophagus, also a conducting channel, the rectum, anus, and vagina. Cuboidal is named cuboidal because, hey, guess what? It looks like a cube. These are found in the kidney tubules, as you can see right here, simple cuboidal. You can see the shape of the cells centers around that nucleus, and it doesn't splay out the way the squamous do. Simple cuboidal is for secretion and absorption, and stratified is extremely rare. This is in sweat glands, some of the mammary gland ducts as well. Columnar looks like a column. You can see here, this is a beautiful micrograph down here. This is simple columnar of the microvilli in your intestine. So here's where all the food stuff will pass by, and it will be absorbed through the columnar cells into, here's the capillary. You can see the basement membrane right here. The basement membrane is the attachment area of all these cells. And one of these right here is a columnar cell, and this right here is a goblet cell, which we'll talk more about when we get into the intestinal tract and the digestive system. Stratified columnar is very rare, although we do see pseudostratified. And stratified is in the urethra. And here you can see the place that all these occur. Simple epithelium, simple squamous, it's a flattened layer of cells in the lungs, in the alveoli, on the skin. You can see simple cuboidal in the kidneys. Again, over here, we have stratified squamous, and then stratified cuboidal down here in the mammary glands. We have simple columnar in the gut and respiratory tract, and then stratified columnar in the urethra, and that's the tube through which urine leaves the body. Muscle, three major types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal muscle is what allows our bodies to produce movement, so we can walk, run, jump, lay down, sit up, stand up. So we can stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight. That's basically it. Cardiac muscle is only located in your heart. And again, the purpose of the heart is to pump blood through your body. And smooth muscle is involuntary. And this is great examples would be in your guts, in your stomach, moving food through your body. Now, skeletal muscles and cardiac muscles share a commonality in that they are both striated. They're striated because the actin and myosin, myofibrils, lay over each other to form stripes. And it's these quote-looking stripe things that allow for the muscle to expand and contract in order to produce movement or to produce the contraction of the heart. Now, these cells, skeletal muscles, cannot divide. They do have satellite cells that allow for growth and repair, however. And this right here is the sarcomere. This is the functional unit of the skeletal muscle, which we will go into more depth in just a few lectures. Cardiac muscle, as you can see very clearly the striations of the actin and myosin here. It's a little bit different in that these cells are called cardiocytes or cardiomyocytes, striated like skeletal muscle cells, and it's a branched network. And these right here are what we call intercalated discs. And the intercalated discs not only allow for the contraction to expand throughout the heart, but also for the electrical impulse that stimulates the contraction to move throughout the entire cardiac tissue. This also allows for a very deep contraction of the heart so that muscle cells don't pull apart. There's very limited ability for repair in cardiomyocytes, very similarly with skeletal muscles, although skeletal muscles are much easier to repair. And the contraction, we'll talk way more about this when we get to the cardiovascular system, is initiated by the sinoatrial node. Smooth muscle has small spindly looking fibers, muscle cells, that do not have striations because the actin and myosin, same ability to contract here, but the actin and myosin are not parallel to each other. They're at right angles and perpendicular. They're all over. And the purpose of this angling of the actin and myosin is so that these muscles can expand, and allow for overlap of maybe only a few actin and myosin to initiate the contraction. It's a much slower contraction than with skeletal muscle or cardiac muscle. These are found in blood vessels, intestines, reproductive and respiratory tracts, and your bladder. And this, we're very thankful that these cells have this differing overlapping of actin and myosin and this spindly shape so that you can sleep through the night without having to get up to pee. Because your bladder is in fact smooth muscle. It expands, and then you know that pee in the morning where it takes 5 minutes because you have so much and you didn't realize your bladder could hold that much. But yes, it can. It is a smooth muscle. And because of the organization of the actin and myosin, it can continue to expand, and then even as it overfills, can still maintain a contraction. Connective tissue is our third type of tissue. We have three major types. We have connective tissue proper. This is what basically connects all the tissues of the body together. We have fluid connective tissue, which is the blood and the lymph. And then we have the supportive connective tissue, which is all the cartilage and bone, which we talked about in lab a little bit. This is a diagram of what loose connective tissue would look like. You can see all the various fibers here. We have elastic fibers to maintain elasticity. We have reticular fibers to basically hold it together. We have collagen fibers, these big, thick collagen fibers for resistance. Fibroblasts to lay down all these fibers, mesenchymal cells in the middle to lay down the ground substance. Adipocytes provide shock absorption, and blood vessels over here, also connective tissue, move through the body, they feed every cell of the body. And you can see the ground substance here. We have a plasma cell, a free macrophage. These are all white blood cells associated with your immune system. Not those are adipocytes. So connective tissue proper, there's two main types. We have loose and dense, and it's named loose and dense for how it appears upon examination in a micrograph. Loose, we have areolar loose connective tissue, and this has a lot of ground substance. This is to provide shock absorption, allow stretching. It separates the epidermis and the skin from other structures, and epithelial cells commonly cover all the areolar tissue. Adipose is also loose connective tissue, and there's two types, white and brown. White is the kind that stores fat in you and me, and brown is the type of adipose tissue that stores fat in newborns. Dense connective tissue, two main types, dense regular and dense irregular, and they're named for dense regular because there is a regular occurrence and appearance upon micrograph inspection of the fibers that make up this particular type of tissue. And then irregular connective tissue, the fibers have no basic pattern, but this does have a very important function in withstanding stress in multiple directions. This is usually underneath the skin, the perichondrium, the periosteum, we talked about that, surrounds all the bones, encapsulates all of the organs, and encloses the joint cavities so that we can have movement. Now, there's a number of different cells, a few different type of cells that allow for secretion of these type of fibers to make up the various types of regular connective tissue. There's fibroblasts secrete proteins that make, you can see all of these proteoglycan fibers right here. Chondroitin sulfate, you've probably heard of these words in advertisements for face creams, etc. These are what lay down these fibers to allow for shear resistance and elasticity of the tissue. And then we have adipocytes, and everything inside here, it looks like air, but that is actually lipid droplets. Those are fatty acids. We remember back to our chemistry chapter where we have our triglycerides, and this is how our body stores fat, which is a form of energy. Now, fluid connective tissue, we have two types. We have blood and lymph. We will talk way more about this when we get to the cardiovascular system and the lymphatic system. Now, within the blood, there's plasma, which is the liquid portion, and then there's the cellular portion of blood, which is the red blood cells, white blood cells, and also platelets. And lymph is extracellular fluid that is pushed out of the capillaries by the pressure on the blood from the heart, as well as the arteries and arterioles, and then is moved back into the venous system to return that some of the fluid is moved back into the venous system, and the other remains in the lymphatic capillaries, which is then returned, as you can see here, it's returned to the heart in the vena cava. Supportive connective tissues, we have two types. We have cartilage and bone. Now, cartilage is firm typically, and it is laid down by chondrocytes. Now, typically when we think of cartilage, we think of our wiggly ears and our wiggly nose, but cartilage plays a large role in allowing your bones to freely articulate and move with one another. Cartilage is avascular, which means that it does not have its own blood supply. All the nutrients move into this tissue via diffusion, and it heals much, much slower than bone, which is why a tear in your meniscus in your knee is so harmful and so painful and usually requires surgery, because cartilage doesn't heal very quickly because it does not have a vascular system supporting it. It only is supported by diffusion. There's hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is beautiful. It has, you can see the lacuna in which the chondrocytes reside, and you can see the matrix secreted around it. It looks like this glassy substance. Now, hyaline cartilage, there's cartilage between the ribs and the sternum, and there's articular cartilage between the elbow and the knee, and various synovial joints that allow free movement. Elastic cartilage is in the outer ear, the middle ear passageway, the epiglottis, and the larynx. So it's more flexible, like your nose, you know, how you can move your nose and plug it up. Yep, that's your elastic cartilage. Now, fibrocartilage is extremely dense, and this is what occurs in your intervertebral discs, between your pubic bones, because I don't know if you've noticed, but your pelvis doesn't really move very much. If you've ever been pregnant, toward the end of your pregnancy, you can physically feel your pubic symphysis, which is the joint between the two pelvic bones, relaxing a little bit. It feels really weird. And this is so that the baby can get out. As well, it's fibrocartilage, and it, in response to hormones, can actually loosen a little bit. This is also around the tendons and joints. Now, the second type of supportive connective tissue is bones. There's a lot of words on this slide, so just bear with me here because we're going to talk about bones in a few lectures here. So the matrix of bone is mostly calcium salts and collagen fibers. Collagen fibers, as we talked about in lab, make up basically the twisting matrix around which the calcium salts, hydroxyapatite, and phosphorus will be deposited to form what we know as that tough bone. Like if you were to knock on your skull, that's what it sounds like. These contains osteocytes, which are the bone cells, and these are contained within between the bone cells are these tiny canals called canaliculi, because remember, your bones are hard. All of these osteocytes are living, however, all of the matrix around them is a non-living substance. So the canaliculi allow for communication between the living cells within the bone. The bone undergoes remodeling throughout the entire life. It stores lipids, it makes red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. And here you can see example of all of these. Here's connective tissue proper, areolar connective tissue. Areolar connective tissue, I like thinking of it like there's lots of air, even though it's not air, it's ground substance, but it looks like upon micrograph inspection that there is more air or space in there. It's ground substance and it serves a purpose. There's specialized connective tissue, such as here with cartilage. You can see cartilage and bone right here. This is cartilage, this is the osteocyte. You can see all of them there, and then this whole concentric circles is the osteon, the functional unit of the bone. And here you can see the blood, the red blood cells, and then these with the lobe nuclei are the white blood cells. And then we see dense regular connective tissue, and you can see the regularity of which the fibers move through this tissue, and adipose, and this is found just under the skin for insulation as well as energy storage. Which brings us to our last type of cell. Or tissue. And this is neural tissue. These are made up of neurons and neuroglia. Neurons are what we typically refer to as nerve cells, even though a nerve, the definition of a nerve is multiple neurons moving to and through the same area. So it's a number of neurons that make up one nerve. And the neuron is the cell that allows for communication between one part of the body and the other. Neurons have very limited ability for repair. For example, if you get a spinal cord injury, it's not going to recover. You typically, with a spinal cord injury, will lose the loss of a limb or two. The structure, there's a cell body, dendrites, and an axon, and all of this allows communication with the surrounding cells. Here you can see a micrograph of a neuron. You can see in the center we have the cell body, that's where the nucleus is located. The cell body is where all of the organelles that we've talked about reside. Same organelles within a neuron, it just has a different function. And then you can see the axon over here, and this part where it branches into the axon, that's called the axon hillock, be very important. And you can see all of the dendrites branching off, and the dendrites communicate directly with the axons, and it basically forms a chain throughout your body, bringing communication into and sending messages out. Now, that's the end of our first part of our tissues. By now, you should be able to name and describe the function of the 4 types of tissues, describe how epithelial shape and classification contributes to its function, differentiate between the 3 types of muscle based again on structure and function. Do you see a theme here? Discuss the different types of connective tissue, and explain how neural tissue is different from other tissue types. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.